The doctor's hands were shaking. I noticed she was not looking at the ultrasound screen, where my baby's heartbeat was moving in black and white. Instead, she was staring at my file. More specifically, she was staring at my husband's name printed clearly at the top of the page. Then, without warning, she turned off the monitor. Just like that. In the middle of the exam. It felt as if someone had pulled the plug on my entire life. "Mrs. Mercer," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I need to speak with you in private. Right now." She guided me into her office, closed the door, and locked it. My first thought was that something was wrong with the baby. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't think clearly. Then she said the words that shattered my world. "You need to leave your husband today. Before you go home. Find a divorce lawyer first." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "What? Why?" I asked. "We're having a baby together. We're happy. I don't understand." "That's exactly the problem," she said. Her face had gone completely pale. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you believe about your marriage. But first," she continued, "you need to understand how I ended up here. How I was sitting in that office, for months pregnant, realizing my entire life was built on lies told by the man who slept beside me every night. My name is Daphne Wilson. I am 32 years old. I work as a marketing director at a small boutique firm in Connecticut. I come from what people politely call old money. My grandmother, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago. She left me her estate, worth about $2.3 million, placed in a trust. She also left me the historic Wilson family home, where 5 generations of women had lived, loved, and raised their children. I never showed off my wealth. I worked hard to build my own career. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and bought my coffee from the same shop every morning. The inheritance wasn't about luxury to me. It was about security. IT didn't define who I was. But it did make me a target. I just didn't realize that yet. I met Grant Mercer 4 years ago at my family's annual charity gala. The Wilson family had been hosting it for decades. That night, I was standing at the bar, trying to escape a conversation with a man who asked about my financial situation within 3 minutes of meeting me. Very subtle, right? That's when Grant appeared. Tall, dark hair, an easy smile. He asked what I was drinking and made a joke about the terrible jazz band playing in the background. He didn't mention money even once. He said he was a financial advisor who had received a last-minute invitation from a colleague. He even claimed he didn't know who the Wilson family was. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. A financial advisor who doesn't research the host family of a major charity event. That's like a chef showing up to a cooking competition and saying, "Oh, we're cooking food today?" I had no idea. But I was exhausted by obvious gold diggers. And here was this charming man asking about my favorite books instead of my bank account. We dated for a year. Grant was attentive and thoughtful. He remembered the smallest details about me. He always insisted on paying for dinner, even though I could have bought the entire restaurant. He seemed real. Honest. My mother, Vivian, saw through him immediately. After meeting him for the first time, she pulled me aside. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she said. "Something is wrong with him, Daphne. I can feel it." I told her she was being paranoid. Overprotective. Maybe even jealous. Grant became a constant source of arguments between us. Eventually, we stopped talking altogether. 2 years of near silence followed between me and the woman who raised me. Just short birthday texts. Nothing more. All because I chose to trust my husband instead of my own mother. Spoiler alert. My mom was right. And she has been waiting very patiently to say, "I told you so." And at this point, she has fully earned it. Grant and I got married after 1 year of dating. We had a beautiful wedding at my grandmother's estate. During his vows, Grant cried. Tears ran down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back now, those may have been the most honest tears he ever shed. Not because he was happy, but because he felt relieved. His long plan was finally working. After 2 years of trying to have a baby naturally, we went to see a fertility specialist. The diagnosis hit us hard. Grant had severe male infertility. His sperm count was almost zero, and the few sperm he had barely moved. Getting pregnant naturally was almost impossible. Grant looked completely devastated. He cried in the car for 20 minutes. He kept apologizing again and again, as if it were his fault. I held him and told him we would figure it out together. That's what marriage meant to me. What I didn't know was that Grant wasn't crying because he was heartbroken. He was crying because his plan had just become much more complicated. Those emotions weren't grief. They were calculations. We decided to try IVF using a special procedure called ICSI, where doctors inject a single sperm directly into an egg. It was our best option. Grant insisted on researching the clinics himself. He found one he said was perfect and took care of all the paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being supportive because I was emotionally exhausted. The first IVF cycle failed. I was crushed. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Grant held me, whispered words of comfort, and promised we would try again. The second cycle, 7 months ago, worked. The pregnancy test was positive. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I cried tears of joy. Grant held me tightly, already talking about nursery colors, baby names, and the future he said he had always dreamed of. Then, casually, Grant mentioned that I should update my will now that we were starting a family. He said it in such a calm, caring way. I thought it was sweet. Practical. The kind of thing a responsible husband would suggest. I had no idea he was already counting my grandmother's money as his own. Everything felt perfect. A loving husband. A baby on the way. The life I had dreamed about since I was a little girl playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden. I didn't know that in just 3 months, a stranger with shaking hands would show me documents that would burn that perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea that the fire had been started by the man who slept next to me every night. Before we go on, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every comment, and it truly means the world to me. Now, back to the story. At 4 months pregnant, something in my marriage began to change. It started with small things. The kind you notice but explain away, because the truth feels too painful to face. Grant began placing his phone face down wherever he went. He changed his password to one I didn't know. He would step outside to take calls, then come back saying it was work-related and quickly change the subject before I could ask anything. He claimed he was restructuring client portfolios during late-night calls at 11 o'clock on a Saturday. I'm not a financial expert, but I'm pretty sure the stock market is closed on weekends. Unless Grant had secret clients in Tokyo, which he definitely did not. Something else was happening. The late nights at the office became more frequent. 3 nights a week. Sometimes 4. He wouldn't come home until midnight. He said it was part of being a financial advisor, not an emergency room surgeon. What could possibly require that kind of schedule? I found receipts. A restaurant downtown I'd never been to. $280 for dinner for 2. A hotel in the city 40 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room so close to home? When I asked, Grant had answers for everything. Smooth, practiced answers that came just a little too quickly. Client dinner. Important networking. The hotel was for a conference that ran late. And it just made more sense to stay over than drive home exhausted. And when I pushed harder, when I asked more questions, his tone changed. Daphne, you're being paranoid. It's the hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational during pregnancy. Don't turn into one of those wives. I felt ashamed for even asking. That's how good he was at this. He made me apologize for questioning him. The financial pressure intensified around the same time. Grant's requests about money became more frequent, more urgent, more creative. We should add me to your trust. What if something happens during delivery? I need to be able to access funds for the baby. It's just practical. Power of attorney is common sense. Every married couple does it. Unless you don't trust me, your grandmother's house is too big for us anyway. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize our returns. The man wanted me to sell my grandmother's home and let him invest the proceeds. This is the same man who insisted we needed 3 different streaming services because he couldn't remember which one had his shows. That's who I should trust with $2 million. Absolutely not. When I said no, gently and carefully, Grant's warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. He started sleeping on the very edge of the bed, saying I moved too much now that I was pregnant. Our arguments became more frequent. He would bring up the trust, and I would refuse to discuss it. Then he would punish me with silence for days. His silent treatments always ended the moment he got hungry. Funny how that worked. Apparently, his principles had an expiration date, and it was an empty stomach. He barely touched me anymore. He blamed my changing body. Said he didn't want to hurt the baby. On the surface, it sounded caring. Deep down, it felt like rejection in my bones. I tried to talk to him about how it made me feel. He said I was being needy, hormonal, difficult. Slowly, I started wondering if maybe the problem was me. One night, I woke up at 2 in the morning and realized Grant wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a low voice. I stood in the hallway and listened. "It's almost time," he said. "By spring, everything will be settled. We just need to wait." The moment he saw me, he hung up. "Work emergency," he said. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m. about things being settled by spring. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still fine. The following week, my best friend Tara came over for lunch. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and watched as I made excuse after excuse for Grant. His stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put down her fork and looked at me with the same eyes that had known me since college. "Daff," she said gently, "listen to yourself. When was the last time you talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "And when was the last time Grant was actually happy to see you, not just pretending to be happy? Not pretending for other people. Truly happy to see you walk through the door?" I couldn't answer that question either. "Trust your gut," Tara said. "Something is wrong here." I told her she was being dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same thoughts. Grant's phone, always face down. The late nights. His sudden focus on getting access to my money. The way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was a problem to solve, not a person to love. At 4 months pregnant, I went in for a regular OB appointment for an ultrasound. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with her colleague instead, Dr. Claire Brennan. I went alone. Grant had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't miss. It was supposed to be a routine appointment. Nothing unusual. I lay back on the exam table, the cold gel spread across my stomach, waiting to see my baby moving on the screen like always. Her hands were still shaking as she opened the folder. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. When I saw your husband's name on your file just now, I recognized it immediately." Dr. Brennan took a deep breath. "Mrs. Mercer, I am so sorry. But you need to see this before you go home. Before he knows that you know." She opened the folder on her desk between us. In that moment, everything I believed about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved turned to ash right in front of my eyes. Dr. Claire Brennan's younger sister, Molly, worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic. The same clinic my husband had carefully researched for our IVF treatment. The same clinic he insisted was perfect for us. Now I finally understood why he had been so specific about that choice. Claire explained everything. Her voice stayed calm, even though her hands did not. 3 weeks earlier, Molly had shown up at Claire's apartment close to midnight. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. She hadn't been sleeping. She had lost weight. The guilt had been eating her alive for months, and she couldn't carry it anymore. 7 months ago, Molly told her, A patient's husband had approached her at the clinic. He was charming, well-dressed, and seemed desperate but reasonable. He said he had a special situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he explained, but they were using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. There was some family genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal. He just needed help keeping it quiet. He offered to pay for her assistance. $30,000. For a nurse earning $52,000 a year, drowning in student loans and credit card debt, it felt impossible to refuse. Molly helped switch the samples. Grant's sperm, which couldn't have caused a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was involved too. Grant had approached him separately and paid him as well. Between the two of them, the switch went completely unnoticed. The embryologist told Molly not to worry. The husband knows what he's doing, he said. It's not our business what arrangements married couples make. But it stayed with Molly, especially when she later saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby she believed was her husband's child. And it wasn't. The guilt destroyed her. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She started calling in sick all the time. She had panic attacks at work. 3 weeks ago, she finally broke. She told Claire everything. I sat in that office as Dr. Brennan explained how my husband had spent $50,000 to frame me for cheating on him. $50,000. That was more than he spent on our entire wedding, including the honeymoon. I guess that's when I finally understood where his real priorities had always been. And they definitely weren't the open bar. But there was more. So much more. Claire laid out the full plan. A scheme Grant had been building carefully for over a year. Phase 1 was already done. Bribe the clinic staff. Switch the sperm samples. Make sure everyone stayed silent. Phase 2 was also complete. Wait for a successful pregnancy. Act like the loving, excited future father. Create the perfect image. Phase 3 was planned for after the baby was born. Grant was going to have the embryologist change the clinic records. The paperwork would be altered to show that our second IVF cycle failed. That way, it would look like we had conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4 was the trap. After the baby was born, Grant planned to suggest a DNA test. He would present it as something sweet and meaningful. Proof of fatherhood. Something to frame and hang in the nursery. A celebration of our family. Phase 5 was the final strike. When the DNA test showed he was not the biological father, and the medical record showed we had conceived naturally, Grant would have everything he needed. His wife had cheated. The baby wasn't his. He was the victim. Our prenup included an infidelity clause. That's common in wealthy families. It protects assets. If one spouse cheats, they owe the other spouse $500,000 in penalties. On top of that, the cheating spouse loses any claim to the other's property. The wronged spouse can also sue for additional emotional damages. Grant's end goal was painfully clear. He would walk away with at least $500,000. He would destroy my reputation. He would likely get even more through a lawsuit. And I would have been so shocked, so humiliated, so desperate to protect my child that I wouldn't have fought back properly. He was counting on my shame to keep me quiet. He almost succeeded. Dr. Brennan pulled more documents from the folder. Molly had saved everything. The original sample records showing the switch. The donor's ID number. Payment records that could be traced back to accounts Grant controlled. There were even emails between Grant and the embryologist. They thought they were being smart, using personal email accounts and vague wording. But it wasn't enough. There was more than enough evidence. Molly had also tracked down the donor. His name was Derek Sykes. He was a 28-year-old graduate student who had been paid $15,000 in cash. A normal sperm donation usually pays only a few $100, $100, maybe $200. $15,000 should have been a huge red flag. But student loans don't pay themselves. Derek was told it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted extra discretion. He had no idea he was being pulled into a fraud. When he learned the truth, he was furious and willing to cooperate fully. There's one more thing, Claire said carefully. Something she had discovered on her own. Grant Mercer had $180,000 in gambling debt. He had been gambling for years. Online poker. Sports betting. Casino trips he told me were business conferences. All while pretending to be a responsible financial advisor with his life completely under control. The money for the bribes, the $50,000 he paid to corrupt my IVF and frame me for cheating, had been stolen from his own clients. He embezzled small amounts over time, carefully hiding it in the accounting. That moment when we accidentally bumped into each other at the charity gala wasn't an accident at all. Grant knew exactly who I was and how much I was worth before he ever said hello. The way he cried at our wedding, I thought those tears were from happiness. They weren't. They were tears of relief. His long con was finally working. And my mother, Vivian, the woman I pushed away for 2 years. The woman I called paranoid, jealous, and overprotective. She saw through him in 5 minutes. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. She tried to warn me. I chose him over her. I thought about crying. I thought about screaming. I thought about driving home and confronting him, throwing the papers in his face and watching him panic as he tried to explain. But then something else happened. Something cold settled in my stomach. Something sharp. Focused. Completely calm. He thought I was stupid. He built this entire plan believing I would fall apart. That when his trap snapped shut, I would be so broken by the proof of my infidelity that I would give him whatever he wanted just to make it end. He thought I was weak. Naive. Easy to manipulate. He had no idea who he married. I looked at Dr. Brennan. He doesn't know that I know, I said. No, she replied. My sister hasn't told anyone else. I only connected you to this when I saw your file today. Good. I carefully gathered the documents. I need copies of everything. And I need you to connect me directly with Molly. Dr. Brennan asked, "What are you going to do?" I stood up and placed my hand on my stomach. On the baby who was completely innocent in all of this. A child who didn't choose their biology. A child I already loved, no matter what any DNA test or donor record said. My husband thinks he's been playing chess, I said. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He thinks he's already won. I straightened my shoulders. He was about to learn that I had already flipped the board. I drove home from that appointment with my face carefully neutral. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My breathing was calm. Just in case. Grant had installed security cameras around our house 2 years earlier. At the time, he said it was for safety. Now, I wondered if it was surveillance. If he watched the footage. If he studied my expressions and movements, searching for any sign that I suspected the truth. So I gave him nothing. He was waiting when I got home, standing in the kitchen with that familiar smile that never reached his eyes. My mother's words echoed in my mind. 2 years too late. How was the appointment? He asked. Is the baby okay? I smiled back. I walked over and hugged him. I handed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Brennan had printed before everything changed. Perfect, I said. Everything's absolutely perfect. I deserved an Oscar for that performance. I smiled at him over dinner while quietly calculating how much his bail might be. I asked about his day while imagining him in an orange jumpsuit. I even laughed at his joke about baby names. It wasn't funny at all, but I stayed in character like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I apologized. Rosalind. He was terrified of losing his medical license and going to prison. He agreed to say whatever was necessary to put Grant away. The hardest call I made was to my mother. 2 years of near silence. 2 years of choosing Grant over her. I had defended him when she questioned his intentions. I stopped inviting her to holidays. I called her jealous, paranoid, unable to accept that I was happy. And she had been right about everything. The phone rang twice before she answered. Daphne. Her voice was careful. Hopeful. Like she had been waiting for this call for 2 years but didn't want to scare it away. Mom. My voice broke on the word. You were right. About everything. About him. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There was a pause. I braced myself for the "I told you so" she had earned. For anger. For resentment. For the pain I had caused by choosing a con man over the woman who raised me. Instead, she said, "What do you need, sweetheart?" She didn't gloat. She didn't list all the warnings I had ignored. She didn't remind me that she had tried to tell me for years. She just asked how she could help. That broke me more than anything else. My mother is a retired attorney. She specialized in estate law for 30 years before stepping back. Within 48 hours, she had connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Connecticut and a criminal prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases. My mom taught me something important that day. The people who truly love you don't need to be right. They just need you to be okay. I had spent 2 years choosing a con man over the woman who raised me. And when I finally called her in tears, her first instinct was still to protect me. That is what real love looks like. Grant never understood that. Because he had never felt it. My lawyer was a woman named Sandra Kowalski. She was 5'2", sharp as a blade, and silver hair. Reading glasses always resting on her nose. She looked like someone's kind grandmother. In reality, she was a shark wearing a cardigan. Sandra reviewed everything. The clinic records. Molly's sworn statement. Rosalind's findings. The affair evidence. The embezzlement documents. When she finished, she looked up at me over her glasses and smiled. "Your husband is facing charges for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement," she said. "The infidelity clause in your prenup now works in your favor, because he's the one who has been cheating. And his plan to falsify medical records after the birth. That's a felony he intended to commit. We have clear evidence of intent." She coordinated directly with the prosecutor. Molly gave a formal sworn statement to the police. The embryologist cooperated in exchange for reduced charges. Grant's firm was quietly informed about the missing money and immediately froze his access to all client accounts. A judge reviewed the evidence, found probable cause, and issued an arrest warrant for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. My lawyer called it a formality. I called it the most beautiful piece of paper I had ever seen. 8.5 by 11 inches of pure karma. 6 weeks after that ultrasound appointment, I suggested to Grant that we throw a celebration. A baby moon party at my grandmother's estate. Both families. Close friends. A peaceful afternoon garden gathering to celebrate the baby arriving soon. His eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. More witnesses for his devoted husband act. More people to feel sorry for him later when his wife was exposed as a cheater. More sympathy he planned to milk. "That's a wonderful idea," he said, kissing my forehead with that gentle, practiced affection. Way that used to make me feel safe. "Let me help plan everything," he said. "No, no," I replied, gently patting his chest. "You've been working so hard lately. All those late nights at the office. Let me handle the party. You just show up and enjoy it." He had no idea that my version of handling everything included police officers waiting quietly in the guest house, my lawyer standing near the bar, Derek Sykes ready to testify, every piece of evidence neatly organized in folders, and his own parents about to learn exactly who their son really was. The party was set for Saturday. That morning, Grant spent a long time in the bathroom, practicing expressions in the mirror, adjusting his tie, rehearsing his excited father smile. I watched him through the crack in the door. This was the man I had shared a bed with for 3 years. The man I had trusted with my future, my family, my heart. He believed he was walking into his greatest success. He had no idea he was walking into his own funeral. The Wilson family estate in late spring was breathtaking. My grandmother's gardens were in full bloom. 50 years of careful care bursting with color. White tents covered the back lawn. Champagne chilled in silver buckets. Flowers decorated every table. A string quartet played softly near the rose bushes. About 50 guests wandered through the garden in their Sunday best. Family. Friends. Colleagues. Grant's parents had driven up from Maryland. They looked so proud of their successful son and his beautiful pregnant wife. My grandmother would have loved this party. She also would have seen through Grant in about 30 seconds. But that's grandmother wisdom for you. The older generation has a radar for fake people that the rest of us usually learn the hard way. Grant was in his element. He moved through the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes. Friendly pats on the back. That charming laugh he had perfected over years of practice. His hand kept resting on my stomach whenever someone lifted a camera. Every time a photo was taken, there he was, the loving father-to-be, looking at me with what appeared to be pure adoration. He was very good at pretending to be human. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That feeling lasted about 3 seconds. Then I remembered the $50,000 he had spent trying to ruin my life. Any sympathy disappeared immediately. Grant's mother kept wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. I always knew he'd be a wonderful father, she told anyone nearby. Such a good boy. Such a caring husband. His father walked around proudly, shaking hands, chest pushed forward. He looked thrilled about the family Grant was supposedly building. The Mercer legacy continuing. The name carried forward. My own mother stood near the dessert table. She watched Grant with the calm focus of a cat watching a mouse that doesn't yet realize it's trapped. When she caught my eye across the lawn, she lifted her champagne glass slightly. Almost time. Around 3 o'clock, Grant did exactly what I knew he would. For weeks, he had been hinting about celebrating fatherhood with a DNA test. Framing the results in the nursery. Proof of their bond. Romantic. Meaningful. Completely staged. At the party, he brought it up again, loudly, making sure plenty of people could hear. You know what we should do, honey. He pulled me close, wrapping an arm around my waist, playing perfectly to the crowd. I've been thinking. Let's get one of those DNA test kits. We can frame the results for the nursery. Proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special? Several guests made soft-o sounds. His mother dabbed her eyes again. I pretended to hesitate. Oh, I don't know, I said. That sounds like a lot of trouble. Come. Come on, it'll be amazing, Grant pressed. We could even open the results right here, right now. Make it part of the celebration. What do you think, everyone? The crowd responded with encouraging murmurs. Someone said, how sweet. Another woman laughed and said she wished her husband was that thoughtful. I looked around, playing the shy, uncertain wife. Well, if everyone thinks it's a good idea. Grant was practically glowing. This was his moment. The trap he'd spent more than a year building was about to snap shut. He could already taste my money, my humiliation, my complete destruction. He just didn't realize whose neck was actually in the trap. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small platform near the fountain, the one set up for speeches and toasts. I picked up the microphone. Grant smiled up at me from the crowd, champagne glass in hand. I could see it in his eyes. He was already rehearsing his shocked, devastated expression, practicing the tears he planned to cry when everyone learned about his unfaithful wife. Thank you all for coming today, I said, my voice steady as it carried across the lawn. This party is supposed to be about celebration, about family, about truth. I found Grant's eyes in the crowd. My husband said he wanted to reveal something special today, I continued, so I'm going to help him do exactly that. His smile flickered for just a moment. The first crack in the mask. I reached under the podium and pulled out a thick folder. 3 months ago, I said, I learned something about my husband that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The garden was completely silent now. I want to share it with all of you today because Grant is right. I paused. This should be about truth. Grant's smile froze. Grant was frozen now. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Grant and I struggled with fertility, I said. His diagnosis meant natural conception was impossible for us. So we did IVF at a clinic he chose. I held up the first document. These are the records from that clinic. The original records, before anyone had a chance to change them. I let the word hang in the air. Original. Grant's face drained of color. These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm. He paid a nurse $30,000. He paid the embryologist. And he paid $15,000 to a young man named Derek Sykes. I gestured toward the edge of the crowd. Derek stepped forward. A 28-year-old graduate student who had believed he was helping an infertile couple. He had no idea he was part of a crime. He provided the sperm used to conceive my child, I continued, without my knowledge and without my consent. Gasps rippled through the garden. Grant's mother grabbed his father's arm. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered against the stone patio. My husband's plan was simple, I said. He would wait until the baby was born. Then he would demand a DNA test. I held up another stack of papers. When the test proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew, he planned to accuse me of cheating. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Our prenup includes an infidelity clause, I continued calmly. If I had supposedly cheated, I would owe him $500,000. I would lose my inheritance. He could sue for emotional damages. He could destroy my reputation and walk away rich. Grant finally found his voice. It sounded thin and panicked. Daphne, honey, this is insane, he said. You're confused. It's the pregnancy. The hormones. You're not thinking clearly. I'm not finished. My voice was ice. The crowd went completely silent. In addition to bribing the fertility clinic, I continued, Grant was also cheating on me. I lifted another folder. For 8 months. With his assistant. A sharp intake of breath swept through the guests. There are hotel receipts, text messages, credit card statements, photographs. Grant's father looked like he might sit down. His mother stared at her son like she'd never seen him before. And there's more, I said. Grant has gambling debts totaling $180,000. To cover them, he embezzled over $50,000 from his own clients. I paused. The money he used to corrupt my IVF. It came from theft. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Police officers are on the property, I said evenly. There is an active arrest warrant for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. That's when the color completely left his face. He paid me, Derek said, his voice steady despite the dozens of eyes on him. $15,000. Cash. He told me it was a private donation for a couple who wanted discretion. I had no idea it was part of a setup. The crowd was dead silent now. The embryologist stepped forward next, shoulders hunched, hands clasped in front of him. I altered the lab handling under Mr. Mercer's instruction, he said quietly. I was paid to do it. I've cooperated fully with investigators. Grant looked like he was shrinking in place. This is insane, he whispered. This is a misunderstanding. That's enough, his father said sharply. It was the first time he'd spoken all afternoon. His voice carried the weight of disappointment so heavy it felt physical. Stop embarrassing yourself. Sirens sounded in the distance. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just unmistakable. Grant's head snapped toward the driveway. 2 police officers appeared at the edge of the garden, walking calmly, deliberately, straight toward us. Grant took a step back. Then another. This can be fixed, he said, his eyes darting wildly. Daphne, please. We can talk about this privately. I made mistakes. I was under pressure. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. The officers stopped beside the podium. Grant Mercer. One of them asked. Grant didn't answer. Grant Mercer, the officer repeated. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. They turned him around. Cold metal cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. His mother began to cry. His father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, ashamed. Grant looked at me over his shoulder. This time, there was no charm. No performance. No rehearsed expression. Just fear. You ruined me, he hissed. I met his eyes without flinching. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. They led him away through the garden he'd thought would crown his victory. Guests parted in silence as he passed. The string quartet had stopped playing. Somewhere behind me, my mother stepped closer and placed a hand on my back. I rested my hand on my belly. "My child," I said quietly into the microphone, my voice steady again, "will grow up knowing the truth. Knowing that family is built on honesty, not manipulation. Love, not greed." I set the microphone down. The party was over. The lie was over. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. "He paid me $15,000, Derek said. His voice was calm, even though everyone was watching him. "He told me it was a private agreement. I didn't know I was part of fraud until Mrs. Wilson's investigator contacted me last month." Grant looked around in panic. Just 10 minutes ago, these people had been smiling at him. Now they were staring like they'd stepped on something rotten. His co-workers. His family. The social circle he worked so hard to impress. No one looked at him with respect anymore. Then 2 police officers walked out from the guest house and crossed the lawn slowly. "Grant Mercer," the first officer said in a flat, professional voice. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." They put the handcuffs on him right there in front of everyone. His mother was crying openly now. His father stared at the ground, refusing to look at his son, as if shame had pinned his eyes down. As they led Grant toward the police car, he tried one last time. "Daphne, please," he begged. His voice broke. "We can fix this. I made mistakes, but I love you. I always loved you. Don't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our family." I looked at him carefully. At the man I had trusted for 3 years. The man I defended against my own mother. The man who stood at the altar and promised to protect me, while secretly planning how much he could steal. "You're right, Grant," I said calmly. "We just did." They put him into the back of the police car. I watched as it drove away down the long gravel path, past the gardens my grandmother had planted 50 years ago, through the iron gates of the estate Grant had wanted so badly to control. 50 guests stood in complete silence. Then my mother walked toward me and she put her arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," my mother said quietly. "Your grandmother would be too." And for the first time in months, I finally took a deep, full breath. Grant was denied bail. The judge said he was a flight risk. Between his gambling debts and the dangerous people he owed money to, there was a real chance he would run. Once the arrest hit the news, those gambling creditors became very interested, very fast. They had been patient as long as Grant was married to a wealthy woman. That patience disappeared the moment they realized the money was gone. The assistant he'd been having an affair with for 8 months resigned from his firm the morning after the party. She didn't clean out her desk. She didn't say goodbye. She sent a short email and vanished. She didn't even wait for the handcuffs to click shut before she ran. I've seen rats leave sinking ships with more loyalty. At least rats look back once. Grant's firm finished their internal investigation within 2 weeks. They confirmed that $53,000 was missing and filed their own criminal charges. Caroline Ashford, the woman from Boston, came forward publicly once she heard about Grant's arrest. She had spent 5 years feeling foolish for falling for his act, too embarrassed to seek justice. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. Her statement added another serious layer to the case prosecutors were building. The divorce was finalized quickly. Grant's lawyer tried to negotiate, but there was nothing to negotiate. The prenup's infidelity clause, the one Grant planned to use against me, worked in my favor. He was the one who had been cheating for 8 months. He owed me, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he claimed to own was borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. The criminal case moved fast. Molly Brennan testified. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Derek Sykes gave his official statement. The paper trail Grant believed he had hidden was never hidden at all. Fraud. Conspiracy. Embezzlement. Every charge stuck. Each one carried years in prison. Grant's parents stopped coming to court after the first week. His father released a short statement saying Grant had made choices no parent could defend. His mother checked into a treatment facility for exhaustion, which is what wealthy families call it when reality becomes too painful to face. Grant Mercer, the man who entered my life 4 years earlier with practiced charm and perfect manners, would spend the next several years behind bars. And when he finally got out, he would have nothing. No money. No career. No family willing to acknowledge him. No future targets who wouldn't find his criminal record with a simple search of his name. The trap he built so carefully, so patiently, snapped shut around his own neck. My baby was born 4 months after the party. Healthy. Perfect. Completely innocent of everything that came before. Some people asked if I planned to contact Derek Sykes or include him in our lives in some way. I thought about it carefully. But Derek was a 28-year-old graduate student who made a bad decision for money he desperately needed. He wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't want to be. And I didn't need him to be. My child had me. Had my mother, finally back in my life where she belonged. Had the entire Wilson family. Had the legacy my grandmother built over decades of love and hard work. That was more than enough. That was everything. I learned something through all of this. Family isn't about DNA. It isn't about blood tests or biology or genetic charts. Family is about who shows up. Who stays? Family is about who chooses you every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. I chose my baby when the situation was complicated and messy. That is what family truly means. My mother and I started having lunch together every week, slowly repairing 2 lost years, one honest conversation at a time. She never once said, "I told you so." Not even once. Eventually, I asked her why. She set down her coffee cup, smiled, and said, "Because watching you take that man down was more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be." I laughed. My first real laugh in what felt like forever. 3 weeks after the party, early in the morning, I sat alone in my grandmother's kitchen. My kitchen now. In the house Grant had wanted so badly. Sunlight poured through the same windows that had watched 4 generations of Wilson women live their lives. The same windows my grandmother used to stand by while drinking her morning tea 50 years ago. I made myself a cup of chamomile, her recipe, her favorite brand. Some traditions are worth keeping. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mother, "Lunch tomorrow?" I smiled and typed back, "Always." Outside, the gardens were in full bloom. The roses my grandmother planted when she was a young bride. The hydrangeas she added when my mother was born. The lavender border I helped plant when I was 10 years old, my small hands packing dirt around each seedling while she told me stories about our family. I placed my hand on my belly and felt the baby move. Grant Mercer tried to take everything from me. My money. My reputation. My future. My peace. All he actually did was prove how strong I had always been. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma. I was lucky. I got to deliver mine personally, with documents, in front of 50 witnesses. My grandmother used to say Wilson women don't break. We bend. We adapt. We survive. And when someone tries to burn us down, we rise from the ashes and build something better. Grant thought he married an easy target. He married a Wilson. And now he has plenty of time in a prison cell to think about that mistake. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. See you in the next one.